I was 34 years old when I finally understood just how deep my family's favoritism toward my sister ran. My name's Jack, and honestly, I used to think the whole golden child versus scapegoat dynamic was just internet exaggeration. That is, until I realized I'd been living it my entire life, quietly playing the part of the problem child while my sister, Amanda, could do no wrong. Thanksgiving at my parents' house had always been one of those events where I'd brace myself in the car before walking in, take a deep breath, and mentally rehearse my smile and nod routine. The house itself never changed. Same polished oak floors, same tablecloth my mom broke out every year, same overly sweet smell of cinnamon candles and stuffing. But the atmosphere? That was always heavy, like stepping into a courtroom where I was already guilty. Amanda, 2 years younger than me, has been the star of every show since she was born. Perfect grades, perfect hair, perfect fiancé. You get the picture. If she sneezed, the whole family asked if she needed soup. If I got promoted, they'd ask if I finally planned to settle down and stop being so distant. It was subtle at first when we were kids. More toys under the tree, more claps for her dance recitals than my soccer goals. But as we grew up, the gap widened. By college, Amanda's tuition was fully paid by my parents. When I asked for help with mine, I was told to take out loans because it would build character. This year's Thanksgiving felt different though. Not because of the food or the people, but because I wasn't coming in as the broke, struggling version of myself they remembered. I'd worked my tail off for the last decade, quietly building a tech company with two friends from college. We'd recently sold it, and after taxes, my share came out to just over $12 million. I hadn't told anyone yet, not my friends, not my extended family, definitely not my parents. It wasn't about flaunting it, it was about peace. I wanted to enjoy dinner without the usual backhanded comments about how I never visit or still rent an apartment. Of course, the universe had other plans. The night started out predictably enough. Amanda greeted me at the door with a perfectly rehearsed hug, just long enough for a photo, but not long enough to be genuine. "Jack, you made it," she said, like she was surprised I'd bother showing up. Her fiancé, Matt, gave me one of those firm handshakes meant to establish dominance. You know the type. Dinner conversation quickly became the Amanda show. She had just gotten a new job at some marketing firm, and my parents spent the first 30 minutes asking her about every detail. What was her salary? What was her office like? Did they have a coffee machine? I sat there cutting my turkey into pieces so small a toddler could choke on them, smiling like it was all just so fascinating. Then it began, the first jab of the evening. "So, Jack," my mom said, glancing at me from across the table, "still renting that little apartment downtown?" "Yeah," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Amanda smirked. "You know, if you actually saved some money, you could probably afford a real house by now. Matt and I are already looking to buy. Right, babe?" Matt grinned, obviously pleased to be included. "Yeah, we've been talking with realtors. Probably looking at something around the $700,000 range." My dad chuckled and shook his head. Jack's always been a free spirit. He doesn't like to put down roots. The table laughed. Even my younger cousin snickered. I could feel that old, familiar heat crawling up my neck. The same feeling I used to get when I was a teenager and my report card wasn't as good as Amanda's. Part of me wanted to snap back, to tell them that I could buy 3 of their dream houses in cash and still have money left over, but I bit my tongue. That restraint didn't last long. After dinner, we all moved to the living room for dessert. Amanda, always the center of attention, pulled out her phone and started showing everyone photos of houses they were considering. "This one has a wine cellar," she said proudly. "And this one has a guest room. Perfect for when mom and dad come visit." She turned to me suddenly, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Of course, you probably wouldn't understand the whole home buying process. Renters don't usually think long term." I laughed under my breath, which only seemed to irritate her. "What's so funny?" she snapped. "Nothing," I said. "Just thinking about how quickly things can change." That's when my uncle, never one to miss an opportunity to stir the pot, asked casually, "So, Jack, what do you do again? Some kind of tech thing?" Before I could even answer, Amanda chimed in. "Yeah, he's been working on a startup forever. It's kind of like his personality trait at this point." The room erupted in polite laughter. I didn't laugh. "Actually," I said slowly, my voice calm but deliberate, "we sold the company a few months ago." The room went quiet. Amanda frowned, probably trying to gauge if I was joking. "Sold? Like for how much?" I shrugged. "Enough." That's when the first crack appeared. Amanda's eyes narrowed. "Enough? What does that even mean?" "It means," I said, setting down my plate. That I'm doing just fine. Better than fine, actually. My mom leaned forward. Jack, are you saying you have money now? Like real money? I nodded once. The room felt like it had been vacuum sealed. Amanda's jaw tightened, and then, without warning, she let out a sharp laugh that didn't sound amused at all. You're kidding. You? Worth money? What are we talking about? 6 figures. 7. When I didn't answer right away, her voice rose. Oh my gosh. Are you actually a millionaire? Everyone was staring at me now. Cousins, uncles, grandparents. Like I'd just confessed to a crime. And that's when Amanda exploded. She slammed her fork down so hard it clattered against her plate. Are you serious right now? You've been sitting here this whole time letting us talk about our plans, letting mom and dad worry about money. And you're just sitting on a fortune? My mom's eyes were wide, tears already forming. My dad hadn't moved, just staring at me like he'd never seen me before. The entire table was silent except for Amanda, who had gone from stunned to furious in 30 seconds flat. And just as I opened my mouth to respond, she stood up so suddenly her chair nearly toppled. Amanda's chair screeched against the hardwood floor as she shot to her feet, her face turning the exact shade of the cranberry sauce sitting untouched in front of her. Unbelievable, she said, almost hissing. All these years you've been acting like you're barely scraping by. And you've been what? Secretly hoarding millions. Amanda, my dad said in a low voice, the kind of warning tone he only ever used on me growing up. Sit down. But she didn't. She crossed her arms instead, her shoulders squared like she was ready to go to war. No, I think we all deserve an explanation. Don't you think we deserve to know why Jack has been sitting here all high and mighty, letting mom and dad help him pay for holidays, birthdays, everything, while he's sitting on some giant pile of money? I blinked, completely floored. Excuse me? I haven't asked mom and dad for money in years. Not directly, Amanda shot back, but they've been worrying about you forever. Every phone call with mom ends with her sighing about how she wishes you'd get your life together. You could have told us things were fine. Instead, you liked everyone thinking you were the struggling, misunderstood genius. That stung. Not because she was right, but because it showed just how little she understood me. I didn't tell you because it's not your business, I said evenly. Oh, so now we don't deserve to know? She barked. Amanda, mom cut in, her voice shaky now. He's right. He doesn't owe us anything. But the tears in her eyes betrayed her tone. She wasn't just surprised, she was hurt. It hit me then. This wasn't just about money. For my family. This was about the narrative they'd built around me. The one where I was the cautionary tale, the slightly embarrassing older brother who hadn't figured life out. My success didn't fit the story they'd been telling themselves for years, and instead of being proud, they were angry. Amanda, however, was just getting warmed up. You know what this feels like? She said, gesturing wildly with her hands. It feels like betrayal. You sat here for years while mom and dad prioritized me, paid for my degree, helped me with my wedding planning, and all along, you were secretly rich enough to help them out. And you didn't. You just sat back and watched them stress about money. That made my dad finally speak. She's not wrong, Jack. If you were in a position to help, why didn't you? Your mom's been worried about fixing the roof for months. I stared at him, genuinely dumbfounded. Because no one asked. And because I didn't think my money was supposed to become some kind of family emergency fund. Amanda's fiancé, who'd been silent up until now, chimed in. I mean, it is kind of selfish, man. Family's supposed to look out for each other. I almost laughed. This guy had been engaged to my sister for 6 months, and suddenly he was an authority on what I owed my family. But Amanda took his comment as fuel. Exactly. You could have helped with the down payment on our house. You could have helped mom retire early. But no, you just sat there letting everyone think you were some starving tech guy while you were probably sipping champagne somewhere. I was working 18-hour days building that company. I snapped, my patience finally cracking. I wasn't hiding some secret yacht lifestyle. I was grinding while you were posting pictures from Cancun. Her face twisted into something ugly. Oh, so now you're going to throw that in my face? That I actually enjoyed my life while you worked yourself to death? Sorry if I didn't want to be miserable like you. The room was dead silent except for the sound of my grandmother clearing her throat. She muttered something under her breath about children these days, but no one dared to laugh. Look, I said, taking a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. I'm not here to argue. I came to have dinner, not to be interrogated about my bank account. Amanda scoffed. Oh, so you think you're too good to answer simple questions now? Stop twisting everything I say. I snapped louder this time. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react exactly like this. Like I owe you something. My mom flinched at the raised voice, and for a split second, I felt like I was 12 again, getting scolded for speaking out of turn. Amanda wasn't done though. She turned to my parents, her voice taking on that overly sweet tone she used whenever she wanted something. You know what this means, right? Jack can help with the wedding now. We can make it the way we always dreamed. That's when I realized what this was really about. It wasn't about betrayal or secrecy. It was about what she thought she could get from me now that she knew I had money. Matt jumped in too, clearly encouraged. Yeah, dude, you could cover the venue upgrade we've been eyeing. It's like nothing to someone in your position. My jaw clenched. No. Amanda blinked. No. No. I repeated, calmer this time. Your wedding is your responsibility, not mine. The silence that followed was heavy, but it didn't last. Wow. Amanda said finally, her voice dripping with venom. You really are as selfish as everyone said. Everyone. I repeated. Oh, don't act surprised, she said with a bitter laugh. You've been the topic of conversation for years. Every time you skip a holiday or call less than once a month, Mom worries herself sick. Dad says you're ungrateful. And guess what? Tonight just proved them right. That one hit like a punch to the gut. Not because I believed it, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected for years, that no matter what I did, I'd always be the problem in their eyes. I didn't even realize I'd stood up until my chair tipped back slightly. The whole room was staring at me, waiting for me to explode, waiting for me to prove Amanda right by storming out. But I didn't. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw the desperation underneath all that anger. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. And in that moment, something in me shifted. I sat back down slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. You know what, Amanda? I said quietly. You're right about one thing. Things have changed. Her expression flickered, just for a moment, like she wasn't sure what I meant. I didn't elaborate. Not yet. Instead, I picked up my fork and went back to my pie like nothing had happened, letting the tension hang in the air so thick you could cut it with a knife. Amanda opened her mouth to say something else, but my dad put a hand on her shoulder. For once, even he seemed unsure what to do next. And that's when my phone buzzed on the table, lighting up with a notification that made Amanda's eyes narrow suspiciously. The buzzing phone sat there between us like a live grenade. Everyone's eyes flicked toward it, but Amanda's lingered the longest. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head, suspicious and curious all at once. You gonna check that? She asked, her voice deceptively casual. I glanced at the screen. It was just a notification from my financial advisor confirming the transfer I'd made earlier that day, part of some investments I'd diversified into. I pressed the button to silence it and slid the phone back toward me. Amanda's eyes narrowed. What was that? Work, I said simply. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Work. Right. Then, without warning, she reached across the table and snatched my phone before I could react. Amanda, I said sharply, half rising from my seat. But she was already swiping at the screen, her eyes scanning furiously. So much for privacy, she muttered, ignoring my outstretched hand. The room was dead silent except for the sound of her scrolling. Then her mouth fell open. Oh my gosh, she whispered, then louder. Oh my gosh. What? My mom asked nervously, wringing her napkin. Amanda turned the screen around so everyone could see. He's not just rich, he's filthy rich. Look at this. My stomach dropped as I saw the notification she'd pulled up. Not just the transfer, but the full portfolio summary my advisor had sent me earlier in the week. Every account balance, every asset, every last detail. $12.3 million staring back at me in bold numbers. My mom gasped like she'd been physically struck. My dad sat back in his chair, stunned. My cousins leaned in, wide-eyed. You had this, Amanda said slowly, her voice trembling with something halfway between awe and rage. And you didn't say anything? That's none of your business, I snapped, finally grabbing the phone out of her hands. You had no right to go through my stuff. Oh, cry me a river, she spat. You're sitting on $12 million, and you've been letting mom and dad pinch pennies for years. Do you have any idea how selfish that makes you look? My mom, still staring at the number in her head, whispered, Jack, why didn't you tell us? Because of exactly this. I said, louder than I meant to. Because I knew you'd all act like this. Like my money is some community pot for you to dip into whenever you feel like it. Amanda's face twisted. You're unbelievable. We are your family. And you're just sitting here refusing to help while we struggle? You could change our lives with one wire transfer. You mean your life? I shot back. For a second, she didn't respond. Then something in her expression hardened. Fine, she said coldly. If you won't help willingly, maybe Mom and Dad will finally see who you really are. Before I could process what she meant, she stood up, grabbed her purse, and stormed into the kitchen. A moment later, I heard her voice, hushed but urgent, talking into her phone. My dad frowned. Amanda, who are you calling? Grandma. Amanda called back without hesitation. She deserves to know what's going on. Everyone does. I felt a pit form in my stomach. Grandma was the matriarch of the family, the one person who could turn this entire situation into a full-blown tribunal if she wanted to. She still held all the old family land in her name, still controlled the holiday gatherings, still had the respect of every aunt, uncle, and cousin. If Amanda spun this the wrong way, I could practically see the mob forming. I stood and followed her into the kitchen. She was pacing near the island, phone pressed to her ear. Yes, Grandma, she was saying, her tone dramatic. You won't believe this. Jack's been lying to all of us. He's been pretending to be broke while he's sitting on millions. Millions. And now he's refusing to help Mom and Dad when they need him most. I froze in the doorway. Amanda, I said quietly, hang up. She glanced at me, her lips curling into a smirk, and turned her back to me. Yes, Grandma, you should come by. Everyone needs to hear this. Hang up. I repeated, my voice sharper this time. But she didn't. Instead, she turned around, phone still to her ear, and said loud enough for the whole house to hear. Maybe Grandma should think twice about leaving you anything in her will, since you clearly don't care about this family. That was it, the line that broke something in me. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice shaking with anger now. You'd use Grandma. You'd use her estate, just to punish me for not giving you money? Amanda's eyes flashed. Oh, don't act like you're some saint. If you really cared about Grandma, you'd make sure Mom and Dad could take care of her without stressing. You're just proving you only care about yourself. Me, I said, my voice rising. I've been taking care of myself since I was 18. I paid off my loans without asking for a dime. I built something from scratch while you were living off their generosity. And somehow I'm the selfish one. By now, everyone had crowded into the kitchen, drawn by the shouting. My mom was crying outright. My dad's jaw was set in a grim line. Amanda, sensing her audience, went in for the kill. You know what? If you won't help us, maybe Mom and Dad should cut you off completely. No inheritance, no family property, nothing. Why should you get anything when you're already loaded? I stared at her, stunned. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. This was about erasing me from the family entirely. That's enough, Dad said sharply, stepping between us. But Amanda wasn't backing down. No, Dad, she said, her voice suddenly eerily calm. I'm serious. You should think about it. Jack doesn't need anything from you. I do. You've been saying for years that you want to be fair, that you want to leave something for both kids. Well, now you can give it all to me where it'll actually make a difference. The room went silent. Mom looked at Dad, then at me, her eyes searching mine like she didn't know who I was anymore. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought Dad was actually considering it. That realization hit harder than anything Amanda had said. I looked around the room at all the faces, people I'd spent every Thanksgiving and Christmas with, people who had watched me grow up. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was part of them at all. I felt like an outsider in my own family, standing trial for the crime of not sharing my success. And then Amanda said one last thing that made my blood run cold. Honestly, Mom, Dad, she said, her tone almost casual now. If Jack won't contribute, maybe you should just sell his stuff. His old room, his share of the family land. He's barely ever here. Why waste it on someone who doesn't care? That was the moment the trust broke completely. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just turned and walked out of the kitchen, my phone clutched so tightly in my hand my knuckles turned white. I could hear Amanda still talking behind me, but her voice had become background noise. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the loud, shouting way. I was something colder, sharper. Because if Amanda wanted a war, she'd just started one. I walked out the back door and into the cold November air, letting it hit me like a slap in the face. The night was quiet compared to the storm brewing inside the house. I could still hear the muffled rise and fall of voices through the walls. Amanda no doubt continuing her campaign to paint me as the villain of the story, but out here, it felt like I could finally breathe. I sat down on the porch steps, the same ones I used to sit on as a teenager when I'd sneak outside after an argument with my parents. Back then, it was usually something small, a curfew, grades, a missed chore, but tonight was something entirely different. This wasn't just a family spat. This felt like a fracture, one that couldn't just be patched over with an apology. I pulled out my phone, not to scroll but just to hold on to something solid, grounding myself. For a long moment, I didn't do anything except stare out at the yard, the one I'd mowed every Saturday as a kid, thinking about how far I'd come since then, and how little that seemed to matter now. The door creaked behind me, and I half expected Amanda to come out swinging, but it was my mom. She hesitated at the doorway before stepping onto the porch. "Jack," she said softly, her voice still shaky from crying. "Can we talk?" I didn't look at her right away. "About what?" "About how Amanda just suggested you sell off my share of the family property. Or about how Dad didn't immediately say no." She flinched at that, but didn't deny it. "Your sister? She didn't mean it like that. She's just upset." I finally turned to her, meeting her eyes. Upset because I didn't write her a check on the spot. Mom sighed and sat down next to me, clasping her hands in her lap. "You have to understand how this looks to us, Jack. We've spent years worrying about you. We thought you were struggling. And then to find out that you've been comfortable all this time." "Comfortable?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Mom, I wasn't comfortable. I was working 18-hour days, sleeping on an office couch half the time, eating instant noodles so we could keep the company afloat. You think that was luxury?" Her face softened a little, but her next words still stung. "You could have told us. We didn't have to find out this way." I looked down at my hands. "And what would have changed if I had? You would have still paid for Amanda's college. You would have still helped her with her wedding. You would have still told me to figure things out on my own." She didn't argue with that, and the silence between us said more than words ever could. When she went back inside, I stayed out there for a while longer, letting the cold air numb me. Inside, the noise had quieted, but I knew the conversation was still going on. Amanda didn't drop things easily, especially not when she thought she was right. Eventually, I walked back in, not because I wanted to face them, but because leaving outright felt like admitting defeat. Everyone was back in the living room now, Amanda perched like a queen on the couch with Matt's arm around her. The second I stepped into the room, her smirk returned. "Decided to join us?" she asked sweetly. I didn't respond. I just grabbed my jacket from the coat rack. "You're leaving?" my dad asked, his tone neutral but his eyes wary. "For now," I said. "I think we all need space." Amanda rolled her eyes. "Typical. You run away every time things get hard." That one almost made me turn around, but I didn't. I walked out the door without another word. Driving home that night, the anger gave way to something heavier. Exhaustion, disappointment, a strange hollow feeling in my chest. It wasn't just that Amanda had gone through my phone or that she'd tried to turn the entire family against me. It was that it worked. No one had defended me except Mom, and even she seemed more sad than supportive. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on the couch in the dark, replaying every word, every look, every moment from the night. For the first time in years, I felt completely alone. The next few days were worse. Texts from my parents came in, some gentle, "Can we talk about this calmly?" Some not so gentle, "Your sister is really hurt, Jack. Maybe you could reconsider helping with the wedding." Amanda, of course, sent nothing directly, but I started getting messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in months, all hinting that I should do the right thing and make peace. Then came the kicker, a message from my dad asking to meet about the family land. That phrase made my stomach twist. The land was supposed to be split between Amanda and me someday, a piece of our grandparents' legacy that meant something to all of us. If he was even suggesting taking my share away, I didn't respond right away. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I went back through all my old journals and notes from when I first started the company. The sleepless nights, the near-bankruptcy moments, the deals we barely scraped together. I remembered every sacrifice, every moment I wanted to quit, but didn't. And slowly, as I sat there with those memories, the fog started to lift. If Amanda wanted to paint me as selfish, fine. But I wasn't going to let her, or anyone, take away what I'd built. That was the night I opened my laptop and started planning. Not for a fight, not yet, but for protection. I called my lawyer the next morning and asked him to review every asset I had, every investment, every piece of property, to make sure it was airtight and out of anyone's reach but mine. Then I started digging into the family situation. Quietly, carefully. It turned out there were things Amanda didn't know. Things my parents hadn't told her. Financial troubles they'd kept quiet about. Debts that weren't as small as they pretended. And suddenly, I understood why Amanda was so desperate for me to help. But I didn't tell her any of that. Not yet. Instead, I kept my head down, answering my parents' texts politely but vaguely, never committing to anything. I let Amanda think she'd gotten the upper hand, that she'd shame me into silence. Because I knew something she didn't. Thanksgiving had been the last time I was going to let her publicly humiliate me without consequence. I didn't know exactly what the revenge would look like yet, but I knew one thing. When it came, it would be quiet, precise, and devastating. And as if fate wanted to hand me the first piece of the puzzle, an invitation arrived in the mail 2 weeks later. Amanda and Matt's official wedding announcement. The date was bold at the top. The venue was just below it. And as I stared at that fancy cardstock, an idea began to form. The kind of idea that made me smile for the first time in weeks. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, something inside me had changed. I wasn't angry in the same raw, explosive way anymore. The night of that fight had been like a firestorm. Hot, chaotic, destructive. Now, it felt like the embers had cooled and hardened into something sharp and deliberate. If Thanksgiving had been the night I hit rock bottom with my family, December was the month I started climbing out. But this time, I wasn't climbing back to the same place. I threw myself into work, though work looked different now that my startup had been acquired. I wasn't grinding 18-hour days anymore. I had freedom, real freedom, for the first time in my life. I used those quiet mornings to think strategically about everything. My finances, my relationships, even where I wanted to live. The first big move I made was buying a house. Not just any house. A modern place in one of the best neighborhoods in the city. The kind of home that made you feel calm just by walking through the front door. I'd always rented tiny apartments because I never wanted to feel tied down, but now I wanted a base of operations. A fortress. The process was oddly satisfying. Signing those papers, wiring the funds, walking through the empty rooms and imagining what they'd look like when I was done. It felt like staking a flag in the ground. I wasn't the struggling older brother anymore. I wasn't the guy they pitied. I was building a life on my terms. With the house secured, I turned my attention to the family land issue. Dad had texted again asking if we could sit down like adults and discuss the inheritance. His wording was careful, polite, but I could read between the lines. Amanda was pressuring him. She probably had a PowerPoint presentation ready about why I didn't deserve my half. So, I called my lawyer. We sat in his office one rainy afternoon going through every document connected to the land. Deeds, trusts, wills, all of it. And what we discovered was almost funny. The way the property had been structured legally, I had far more leverage than Amanda realized. My grandparents had left a clause that gave me the right of first refusal on any sale of the property, meaning they couldn't sell anything without offering it to me first. Use it, my lawyer said simply. If they try to push you out, you buy them out instead. That single piece of information was like flipping a switch in my brain. Suddenly, I wasn't on the defensive anymore. I had options, powerful ones. Over the next few weeks, I started quietly consolidating everything. I moved assets into a trust under my name, updated my estate plans, and put legal protections in place that would make it nearly impossible for anyone to challenge my decisions. If Amanda thought she could shame me into giving up control, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. And while all this was happening, life outside of the family drama was actually good. Better than good. I reconnected with a couple of old friends from my college days, guys I hadn't seen much during the grind years of building the company. We grabbed dinner, caught up, laughed about stupid memories, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I had people around me who saw me for who I really was, not who my family had decided I was. I also started taking care of myself again. The stress from Thanksgiving had left me exhausted and burnt out, so I joined a gym, got a personal trainer, and started cooking real meals instead of living off takeout. Within a month, I had more energy than I'd had in years. Amanda, of course, had no idea any of this was happening. From what I heard through the family grapevine, she was busy planning her wedding, posting Pinterest boards full of lavish decor ideas, and hinting loudly to anyone who would listen that she hoped certain people would step up financially. I ignored every one of those hints. In fact, I stayed so quiet that Amanda probably thought she'd won. If she did, she made the mistake of getting comfortable too quickly, because that wedding invitation turned out to be the opening I didn't know I needed. I sat at my new kitchen island one evening with that invitation propped up against my laptop, running numbers and sketching out scenarios. I wasn't just thinking about attending. I was thinking about what kind of statement I wanted to make. Because I wasn't going to miss it. No, that would be too easy for Amanda to spin as me being bitter. I was going to show up. And I wasn't going to show up as the brother they thought they could guilt trip into compliance. In the meantime, I started building a network. Not the kind Amanda could see, not social media posts or flashy announcements, but quiet, strategic connections. I joined a local entrepreneurs club, started attending a few charity events, and even got invited to sit on the board of a small nonprofit that supported young founders. It was funny how quickly doors opened once people realized what I'd built and where I was heading. And the more my world expanded, the smaller Amanda's drama felt. Her tantrum at Thanksgiving, the way she tried to rally the family against me. All of it seemed petty compared to the opportunities one was stepping into now. By January, I was hosting dinner parties in my new house, surrounded by people who actually wanted to be there, people who respected me without needing me to prove anything. And yet, the family tension lingered like a shadow. Every so often, I get a text from Mom asking if I'd thought about making things right with Amanda. Dad kept sending me articles about the importance of family unity. I responded politely every time, short, courteous messages that gave nothing away. I wasn't going to fight with them over text, because I had a better plan forming. One night, sitting by the fire in my living room, I pulled out the wedding invitation again and traced the embossed lettering with my thumb. The date was coming up fast, and as I stared at it, a slow smile crept across my face. If Amanda wanted me at her wedding, I'd be there. But she had no idea what was coming with me. The wedding date circled on my calendar became less of an obligation and more of a target. Every day that passed was another day to prepare, to line things up so perfectly that when the time came, Amanda wouldn't just be surprised, she'd be stunned into silence. In early February, an unexpected opportunity practically fell into my lap. A family friend, Mr. Calderon, a retired lawyer who'd known my grandparents, reached out after hearing through the grapevine that there was some tension over the family land. He invited me to lunch. "Jack," he said as we sat across from each other in a quiet corner booth, "your grandparents were smart. They set things up to make sure both you and Amanda would be treated fairly. But I have to be honest, they were worried about favoritism. Worried that your parents might lean too heavily toward Amanda when the time came." I leaned in. "What do you mean?" He pulled out an old leather folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "Your grandmother left a separate letter with me. Instructions, really. It was meant to be shared only if there was ever a dispute about the land." I opened it carefully. The letter was in my grandmother's handwriting. Neat, precise, every word deliberate. And it was clear. She had wanted me to have the controlling say in what happened to the property. Not Amanda, not even my parents. "She trusted you," Mr. Calderon said. "She always said you had a good head for business. She wanted to make sure the land stayed in the family, but she believed you'd know what to do when the time came." I sat back, letting that sink in. This wasn't just leverage. This was a mandate. I thanked him and took the folder home, locking it in my safe. That night, I reread it 3 times. Each time, I felt a little steadier, a little more sure of what I needed to do. Amanda's tantrums, her phone call to Grandma, her push to have me written out of everything. All of it suddenly felt small compared to the weight of my grandmother's trust. From that moment on, the plan started taking shape in my mind. First, I called my lawyer again and had him draft a formal notice asserting my right of first refusal on any sale or transfer of the family land. We didn't send it yet. We held it in reserve, ready to deliver if things escalated. Then I started quietly buying up adjacent parcels of land near the family property. Most of them weren't expensive, a few acres here, a small plot there, but together, they created a buffer around the main estate. If Amanda ever tried to sell her share, she'd have to go through me. Meanwhile, life kept getting better. My house was fully furnished now, warm, modern, inviting. I turned the spare bedroom into a home office, complete with a wall of bookshelves and a big oak desk where I spent evenings reading contracts, sketching out ideas, and running scenarios. And speaking of scenarios, I started running some social ones, too. At the nonprofit board I joined, I met several people who worked in event planning and hospitality. I made a point of getting to know them, asking questions about venues, catering, even security protocols for high-profile weddings. I played it off casually, but inside, I was gathering every piece of intel I could. Because Amanda's wedding was at one of the city's premier venues, a place I now had contacts at. In fact, one of the board members, Lisa, turned out to be good friends with the venue's director. Over coffee one afternoon, I mentioned that my sister was getting married there. Lisa grinned. "Oh, I know that booking," she said. "It's been a bit of a headache for the staff. Your sister is particular." I wasn't surprised. "Yeah, that sounds like Amanda." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "You know, if you ever needed a favor, a certain table placement, a quiet space reserved, I could probably make that happen." I filed that away for later. As the wedding drew closer, I also started hearing more about Amanda's plans. Not from her directly, but through the family grapevine. She'd gone over budget, was stressed about final payments, and had apparently been telling people she was sure I'd step in at the last minute to help cover the costs. That assumption made my jaw tighten every time I heard it. Not just because she was wrong, but because she was so certain she could manipulate me. The final push came 3 weeks before the wedding. My parents invited me to dinner, just the three of us, which almost never happened. We sat at the kitchen table, and after a few minutes of small talk, Dad cleared his throat. "Jack," he said, "we've been thinking about Amanda's wedding. She's really stretched thin financially. It would mean a lot to the family if you could help out, just a little. Maybe cover the catering or the band. It would go a long way toward mending fences." I looked at him, then at Mom, who was watching me with hopeful eyes. "You mean it would go a long way toward making Amanda happy?" I said quietly. Mom sighed. "She's your sister. This is supposed to be a joyful time. And it can be," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But I'm not going to buy my way back into her good graces. If Amanda wants a relationship with me, it's going to be because she respects me, not because I wrote her a check." Dad didn't say anything after that, just nodded tightly. When I left their house that night, I knew there was no going back. And on the drive home, the plan finally clicked into place. The whole thing, start to finish. Amanda thought I'd show up to her wedding either as a reluctant guest or a guilty checkbook. But I was going to show up as something else entirely. Someone she couldn't ignore. Someone she couldn't control. And the best part? She wouldn't see it coming until it was too late to stop it. By the time I parked in my driveway, I was smiling to myself. Because for the first time since Thanksgiving, I wasn't just reacting to Amanda's games. I was about to turn the tables completely. The morning of Amanda's wedding felt almost unnervingly calm. I woke up early, not because I had to, but because I wanted time to prepare, mentally and otherwise. My suit had been tailored the week before, and it hung on the door like a quiet statement. I wasn't showing up as the scapegoat brother anymore. I was showing up as someone who had chosen to be there, on his terms. Before leaving, I sat at my kitchen island with a cup of coffee and opened the leather folder from Mr. Calderon one more time. My grandmother's words were right there in front of me, as sharp and steady as they'd been the first time I read them. "Jack has the judgment to protect what we built." I slid the letter back into its sleeve and locked the folder in my safe. Then I grabbed the small envelope I'd prepared and tucked it into my inside jacket pocket. When I pulled up to the venue, the parking lot was already packed. Amanda hadn't skimped. This place was one of the most expensive in the city. As I got out of the car, I saw cousins milling around in suits and dresses, some of them giving me polite nods, others avoiding my eyes entirely. Word had clearly gotten around since Thanksgiving, and I could almost feel the tension humming in the air like static. Inside, the venue was stunning. Vaulted ceilings, white flowers everywhere, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Amanda had gone all out. I found my seat near the front, exactly where I had asked to be. That was the first small victory. Thanks to Lisa's call to the director, my name was printed neatly on the card at a prime table, right next to my parents'. Amanda hadn't been told until the morning of, and I could see the flicker of annoyance cross her face when she spotted me. The ceremony went smoothly. Vows, rings, all the usual tears from the parents. Amanda looked radiant, of course, which made sense. This was her kingdom, her carefully curated moment. But the real theater started at the reception. After the first round of speeches, I quietly excused myself and spoke to the venue coordinator, who nodded and handed me the small wireless microphone I'd requested weeks ago. When I walked back to the front of the room, I didn't have to tap my glass. The sight of me holding a mic was enough to quiet the room. "Hi everyone," I said, my voice calm, steady. "I promise to keep this short. First of all, congratulations to Amanda and Matt. You both look incredible tonight, and this is a beautiful event." Amanda gave me a tight smile, clearly trying to guess where I was going with this. "I wanted to take a moment," I continued, "not just to celebrate the couple, but to share something that matters to me, something that I think our grandparents would have wanted shared." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope. As some of you know, there's been a lot of conversation recently about the family property. I think it's time to clear the air. Amanda's smile froze. I opened the envelope and held up the document. A certified copy of my grandmother's letter, along with the legal notice my lawyer had prepared. Our grandmother left instructions, I said clearly, so no one could miss a word. She asked that I take the lead on protecting the property and ensuring it stays in the family. Effective today, I'm formally asserting my right of first refusal on any sale or transfer. That means nothing can be sold or given away without coming through me first. There was a ripple of murmurs through the crowd. My dad sat back in his chair, looking like someone had just poured a bucket of cold water over him. And because I want to honor that trust, I added, I've taken steps to make sure the property is fully maintained, including covering all outstanding debts and repairs myself. From here on out, it won't be a source of stress for anyone. I let that hang in the air for a moment, then smiled. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you. I handed the mic back to the coordinator and returned to my seat, calm and collected. The room was buzzing now, people whispering to each other. Amanda's face had gone pale, not just from the announcement, but from the realization that I had just neutralized her entire campaign to have me cut out. For the rest of the night, the dynamic shifted. Suddenly, cousins who hadn't spoken to me since Thanksgiving were stopping by my table to congratulate me, patting me on the back, telling me how responsible I was for stepping up. Amanda tried to regain control, of course. During dinner, she leaned over and hissed, "You had no right to hijack my wedding like that." I smiled politely. "You wanted me here, Amanda. You wanted me involved. Now I am." Her jaw tightened, but she couldn't make a scene, not with 100 guests watching, not with cameras everywhere. Later, during the dancing, I caught Dad's eye from across the room. He gave me a small nod, not exactly approval, but something close. A recognition, maybe, that I had done what he hadn't been able to, take control of the situation without turning it into a screaming match. By the time the night ended, the whispers had spread. Amanda and Matt were now the ones being quietly criticized for pushing so hard to get me out of the picture, while I was being framed as the responsible one who had saved the family's legacy. It was poetic, really. And as I left the venue, I couldn't help but notice Amanda standing near the exit, her arms crossed, watching me go. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her silence was louder than anything she could have shouted, and it told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just angry. She knew she'd lost control. The fallout from Amanda's wedding didn't hit all at once. It spread through the family like a slow-moving storm. The next morning, I woke up to a phone buzzing with messages, but they weren't what I expected. Instead of angry texts, I saw words like "proud of you," "about time someone took charge," and "grandma would be smiling right now." Cousins, uncles, even some of Amanda's bridesmaids had messaged me privately, telling me I'd handled myself like a gentleman and that my speech had been classy. I sat there at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee and reading through them, feeling the first real weight lift off my chest since Thanksgiving. I hadn't just defended myself, I'd reset the narrative. Amanda, of course, didn't see it that way. By Sunday evening, my parents invited me over to talk, and I braced myself for another round of accusations. But when I arrived, it was Amanda sitting in the living room, still in her post-wedding glow, or at least trying to hold on to it. She didn't waste time. "You ruined my wedding," she snapped. I stayed standing calm. "No, I made an announcement that needed to be made. Your wedding was just the first time the whole family was in one place to hear it." "You embarrassed me," she said, rising to her feet. "You made the entire night about you and your stupid letter." I met her glare evenly. "The night was still about you, Amanda. You got your perfect ceremony, your photos, your speeches. All I did was make sure the family knew where we stood going forward. That's not about you. That's about everyone." She looked to Mom and Dad for backup, but neither of them jumped in right away. Finally, Dad spoke. "Amanda, he's right. What Jack did was responsible. It settles things. No more fighting about the land." Her jaw dropped. "You're siding with him?" Mom put a hand on her shoulder gently. "We're not picking sides, honey. But this takes the pressure off all of us. Jack's already handled the repairs and the debt. That's a blessing, whether you want to admit it or not." Amanda's eyes flicked back to me, full of frustration. "This isn't over." "Actually," I said quietly, "it is. The papers are filed. The land is protected. There's nothing left to argue about." Her face turned red, but for once, she didn't have a comeback. She just grabbed her bag and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. For the first time in years, my parents and I sat together in that living room without tension crackling in the air. Dad let out a long breath. "You know," he said, "I didn't agree with how you handled Thanksgiving. But last night, you did what had to be done, and you did it the right way." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was close enough to feel like one. From that point on, things changed. Amanda still tried to freeze me out for a while, refusing to invite me to smaller family gatherings, but it backfired. Without my presence, those events always turned into complaint sessions about money. And since I wasn't there to be the scapegoat, Amanda started getting frustrated with Mom and Dad for not helping more. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents actually improved. With the financial stress gone, they started visiting my new house for dinners, seeing the life I'd built for myself. Slowly but surely, they began to see me not as the difficult son, but as an equal. Amanda eventually came around, though not out of pure goodwill. About 3 months after the wedding, I got a call from her. She sounded tired, not angry this time. "I heard from Mom you're looking into restoring the old barn on the property," she said. "I am," I replied carefully. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "If you need someone to help plan the event space, I know people who do that professionally." I almost smiled. This wasn't an apology either. Amanda didn't really do apologies, but it was her way of extending a branch. "We'll see," I said. "I'll let you know." And that was enough. By summer, the barn renovation was underway, and the family started using the land again for cookouts and reunions. The tension wasn't gone completely. Some things take time, but there was a shift. Amanda still had her sharp edges, but she didn't push me the way she used to. Not after she'd seen what happened when I pushed back. One night, months later, I stood at the edge of the property as the sun was setting, watching the newly repaired roof of the farmhouse glow in the last light of day. It felt different now, not just a piece of family history, but something I had actively chosen to protect. And for the first time since this whole ordeal started, I felt completely at peace. Amanda could have her spotlight, her drama, her carefully curated life. I didn't need her approval anymore, because I wasn't the scapegoat brother anymore. I was the one holding the keys, literally and figuratively. And as the lights flickered on in the farmhouse behind me, I couldn't help but smile. They finally saw me for who I really was. And this time, there was no taking that back.